Chapter 1815, Heavenly Tao Jade. Chapter 1815, Heavenly Tao Jade. What heavenly Tao Jade? Ling Han hurriedly asked. Small Tower paused slightly, and then said, the heavenly Tao source rock developed over countless years, turning into a treasured jade, also known as the foundation jade, remedy jade. If one refines it in the severing mundane tier, it can make up for all the regrets that one has experienced before in the path of cultivation, and allow to reach perfection. Ling Han was stunned, and asked, you mean even if they did not advance by striking the heaven and earth, they could also forcefully change that via the heavenly Tao Jade? That's right. Small Tower swayed. This was its version of a nod. You don't have to think that it is unjust. The heavenly Tao source rock is formed by the source power of earth, and has to go through countless years of change to be able to turn into a jade. Only one could probably appear every few epochs in the whole celestial realm. Only one would appear in a few epochs. That was even rarer than the reincarnation tree. Anything that involved source power was extremely awesome, wasn't it? Ling Han nodded, but did not place too much importance on it. He had cultivated each cultivation level to perfection. Thus, even if the heavenly Tao Jade fell into the hands of another, it would only allow them to be capable of becoming his equal. However, he still possessed such source powers of the heaven and earth like the Shenyan source water and Nine Heavens flame, as well as an amazing technique like the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Even if someone could cultivate to perfection, there was no need for him to be afraid, either. Just take Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun for example. Hadn't they, too, cultivated each cultivation level to perfection? But so what? Wait, that's not right. If that was the case, then why had Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng come? They had both cultivated each cultivation level to perfection, and there was nothing that they had to make up for. Small Tower humphed, and retorted, the heavenly Tao Jade has another use, and that is if you have cultivated all your cultivation levels to absolute perfection, then it can possibly grant you a sliver of a chance to attain a fifth severin. What? Ling Han was really shocked now. Fifth severance, an achievement that even countless celestial kings could only admire. According to the large black dog, only if one had achieved the fifth severance would he be qualified to become a ninth heaven celestial king or a heavenly venerable tier. To be honest, though Ling Han had only achieved 2 severances, he felt that the difficulty level had soared innumerable times over with every strike he delivered, and third severance had already pushed him to his limits. Fourth severance was definitely his limit. No matter what, there was no way he could deliver the fifth strike. But now, the heavenly Tao Jade had a sliver of a chance of helping him deliver the fifth strike. This was astounding. Fifth severance, to say nothing of surpassing all celestial kings, but there was definitely no problem of surpassing 99% of them. And going by that, the heavenly Tao Jade's value instantly soared countless times over. If it was not for the fact that this thing could only be refined in the severing mundane tier, it was guaranteed that every celestial king would definitely fight madly over it. Realization dawned on Ling Han. No wonder the descendants of 2 celestial king tier forces had appeared. If they had come for the sake of achieving the fifth severance, then it was understandable. Strange, why had those 2 celestial kings not taken it early on, he mused. The development of the heavenly Tao source rock requires very strict conditions. Since it is suited to the environment of this place, it naturally could not be taken from here. Otherwise, it would only be unfinished, and not possess the slightest bit of value, Small Tower explained. Ling Han nodded. This was one of the reasons. Additionally, it was possible that the 2 great celestial kings had not wanted to spark a war with each other. In any case, it was something that would only be useful for their descendants, so they'd just let the descendants compete with one another for it. They should not always think of asking for the help of their elders. Can you sense the location of the heavenly Tao Jade? Ling Han asked, slightly expectant. Of course. Small Tower was very proud. Ling Han was immediately delighted. Previously, it was definitely Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng that had taken the lead. They knew what their goal was and where it was, but now? At least he would not be at a disadvantage. Then let's have a fair competition. Ling Han gripped the Empress's hand lightly, and said, let's go. As they walked, he explained about the heavenly Tao Jade to the Empress, and then asked Small Tower, How many people can refine the heavenly Dao jade? Small Tower pondered. That would have to depend on its size, but it is best not to exceed 2 people. Though Ling Han felt it was a bit of a pity, the heavenly Dao jade was such a precious item, so it would be truly illogical if it could be refined by many people. Hopefully this precious jade was big enough so that both he and the Empress could make use of it. Lead the way, Ling Han said. It is contained on this mountain. Work hard on searching for it. If you obtain it, you are lucky, but if not, then it was meant to be, Small Tower said, putting on a pretense of mystery. Ling Han scoffed, you probably don't know the exact location, either, right? This little thing, if it did not know, it could have just said so. It still had to act so proudly. At present, I can only sense the existence of the heavenly Dao jade. Only if I come close enough will I be able to confirm its exact location. This time, Small Tower did not become angered from being embarrassed. Ling Han nodded. Since that was the case, they would just have to set off to search for it. The 2 of them set out. Behind them, bewitching maiden Ru hesitated slightly, but still followed them. And with her following them, Beiyu Xiong and the others immediately followed as well. Who asked the Empress to be so unapproachable, while the other beauty would always be smiling and lacked any airs? Luo Changfeng smirked coldly. These pieces of trash thought that they were worthy of competing with him over the heavenly Dao jade? Just wait, he would first find the heavenly Dao jade, then come back, and take the beauty for himself. He was sure that his identity as the holy son of a celestial king tier sect would be enough to rob Ling Han of his wife. Zihei Bingyun did not delay much longer, either, and set out on her own. She was the same as Luo Changfeng. They both clearly knew what they were looking for. Merely this fact was a boundless advantage over the others. Ling Han turned to look, and his expression involuntarily became strange. Had this bewitching maiden Ru gotten addicted to tailing them? He shook his head. In any case, he hadn't found the location of the heavenly Dao jade yet, so he did not mind bringing so many people running around all over the mountain and wilderness. This was a grassy mountain densely covered with trees. Furthermore, the majority of them were very normal, and they weren't especially tall. In fact, there were a few that were indescribably short. The forest was not very silent. Occasionally, some deer could be seen popping their heads out of the foliage in curiosity. Upon spotting Ling Han and the Empress, they would break into a run and gallop off. Rustle, rustle. The bushes ahead of them suddenly began to move. Ling Han held the Empress's slender hand, and the 2 of them stopped. The bushes moved, and were presently coming closer to where they stood. What could it be? Wild beasts? Hua, the bushes separated, and a person suddenly leaped out. Yet he was extremely short, only about just over a foot tall. This was a male, but definitely no child, because he had a beard, and his face was indescribably aged. Halt, he shouted, and then another dwarf jumped out. Halt! 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 One after another, a total of 7 dwarfs leaped out. They each wielded a black staff that was only a foot long. In the hands of an ordinary person, that would be a short rod, but in the hands of these 7 people, they were like walking canes that they had to hold with both hands, and they were all pointed at Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han broke into a grin, and said, "All right, I'll halt." What next? The 7 dwarfs looked at one another, and said, "Who are you people? Why have you come to this place? Could it be that they are the so-called giant race? Just look at them, they are all so tall, so ugly," a dwarf said. "They indeed look very ugly. They did not commit suicide even with how ugly they look. I really admire their courage. I never want to go to the outside world, all of them are hideous." These dwarfs looked positively horrified. Chapter 1816, My Hand Shook. Chapter 1816, My Hand Shook. The Empress flew into a sudden fury. One of the things she could least tolerate was criticism of her appearance. Humph. She humphed, her domineering aura on at full blast. "Yi, have I gotten food poisoning? Why do I suddenly feel that this woman is good-looking?" one of the dwarfs suddenly exclaimed, and even blinked his eyes in disbelief. "I seem to think that she is quite good-looking too. Gods, I must be cursed." The 7 dwarfs all paled in shock. This woman was poisonous. She could actually make them think that she was good-looking. They had to be seeing things. Ling Han laughed involuntarily. The Empress's beauty was indeed irresistible. Even if these people had oddly bent aesthetic senses, she could forcefully bend them back the right way. He thought for a moment, and then asked, "Who are you people? Can we go and pay your home a visit?" The 7 dwarfs were still discussing the Empress spiritedly, casting looks at her repeatedly. The more they looked, the more they thought that the Empress was astonishingly beautiful. Then, when they turned back to look at their companions, they all gritted their teeth, wondering how their companions could look so hideous. "We are the warriors of the Garuru tribe," one of the dwarfs declared, an indescribable pride clear in his expression. The heavenly Dao Jade was here, though its exact location was unknown, and there was a group of natives living here, so perhaps they had some clues leading to its location. Ling Han's divine sense swept over the group. Though these dwarfs had some cultivation level, they were all only in the shattering void tier. Their strength couldn't be any lower. It could be that the cultivation system here had not taken form yet. Merely in terms of spiritual chi, it was actually not too weak. "If you want to be guests, that's fine, but don't even think of stealing our treasure," one of the dwarfs said. "That's right, you giants are too bad. According to the records of our ancestors, you people have done many bad deeds." These dwarfs all talked at once, talking about how greedy outsiders were, and how that never led to a good ending. The Empress was proud, and impatiently demanded, "Lead the way quickly." With this rebuke, the 7 dwarfs didn't have any temper, and docilely led the way. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh internally, and followed behind them with the Empress. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Rue and the others were following even further behind. One group followed the other, and after walking for around an hour, a large plain appeared ahead of them. There was a village there, and light smoke could be seen gradually drifting upwards. This was the Garuru tribe. When they saw that the 7 dwarfs had brought 2 giants back with them, a large number of dwarfs suddenly surged out of the village, and all gathered around Ling Han and the Empress, bearing expressions of disgust. "So ugly. So these are the legendary giants. Aya, my eyes are about to go blind. I will definitely have no appetite for food today. Gods, how could there be such a hideous person?" These dwarfs exclaimed in shock, completely unafraid of the powerful severing mundane tier-level strength of Ling Han and the Empress. They were a little silly. However, the Empress's beauty was irresistible to one and all. Not long after, they were all staring in a daze, and began to admire the Empress's exquisite beauty. Ling Han coughed, and asked, "Can we walk around in this place?" "You can't, but she can." These dwarfs all pointed at the Empress, completely prejudiced. The Empress was proud, and walked around the village with Ling Han in tow. Then, Bewitching Maiden Rue and the others also appeared. They also had the same idea as Ling Han had. These natives possibly knew some clue about the great opportunity. They wanted to enter the village, but the Empress was the Empress, and these people were only these people. "Giants, you people are forbidden from entering our sacred village." Immediately, over a dozen dwarfs moved to block the way of Bewitching Maiden Rue and the others, all raising their staffs to point at them. This seemed to be a kind of weapon. Previously, they had seen the dwarfs aiming them at Ling Han and the Empress, but it was unknown what its exact might was. Qian Zhao Tian showed an expression of disdain. These natives were only in the shattering void tier, so their overall level of cultivation was naturally pitifully low. Did he even have to take their opinion into consideration? He was the heir of a 3-star force. What place did not receive him with accolades and utmost courtesy? "You dare to stand in my way?" He strode forwards boldly, and scoffed, "So what if I enter?" "Z." One of the dwarfs was too nervous, and gripped the staff in his hand tightly. Suddenly, a ray of light shot out of the staff, heading towards Qian Zhao Tian. Qian Zhao Tian was stunned. This attack was too fast, so fast that he could not avoid it. But after a moment of surprise, he was completely calm again. That was because this was the attack that had been delivered by a shattering void tier, so even if it had been faster, so what? What could it do to him? What a joke. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, who did not have enough origin power to temper their physique? Even if they could not possibly temper their physique to the extent of pseudo-divine metal's hardness, it naturally was not a big deal for their physique to reach the level of level 20 godly metal. Then, even if he just sat there and allowed these dwarfs to attack him, so what? Peng, this light landed on Chen Zhaotian's chest, and then shot through. Because of the dwarf's height, this attack was slanted upwards. After the light penetrated Chen Zhaotian's body, it shot skywards, and did not shoot towards the others. Chen Zhaotian turned around slowly, and they could see that his whole chest was gone, and slivers of black smoke were still emanating from it. His face was filled with complete confusion and disbelief. He stretched out a hand towards the others, but he had just raised his hand, and it was continuously turning into dust that fell from his arm. That was not the only thing. His whole body was being corroded, and the last was his face that turned into dust which was scattered by the winds. His whole person had turned into a pile of mud that suddenly shattered. He died. The heir of a 3-star force, a 3rd Severance Peak Stage elite, and he had actually been killed so casually by a shattering void tear who was wielding a staff. Both his form and spirit had been obliterated. Even if a celestial king was here, he could not possibly be revived. That was too inconceivable. Bewitching Maiden Rue and the others involuntarily took a step back, and their expressions changed. Next, they retreated further, feeling a numbing shiver come over their whole bodies. It should be known that the staffs of these dwarfs were still aimed at them, though Ling Han did not turn around. With how his divine sense enshrouded the area, he had naturally seen clearly what had happened, and his expression similarly changed. If this kind of light landed on him, would he be able to survive? Ling Han had zero confidence. This light was definitely not a power-based attack, but had rather reached inconceivable heights in terms of regulations. Thus, when the blow rushed through him, Chen Zhaotian died without any resistance. This is a portion of the power from the wood source power. Small Tower's voice rang out. You don't have to worry. You yourself possess 2 source powers, so this kind of attack cannot possibly kill you. The heavenly Dao Jade is definitely in the vicinity. These weapons have gained destructive power through the heavenly Dao Jade. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and asked, "Didn't you say that you would be able to accurately confirm its location once we're close to the heavenly Dao Jade? Did I specify exactly how close we had to get?" Small Tower said very irresponsibly. "Fuck, could it be that you can only locate the heavenly Dao Jade once you see it? Then I would be able to do that too." Ling Han was speechless. At first, Small Tower was only at sunder, but why did it seem like it was developing a tendency of screwing others over? "Are you 17? You killed someone," the dwarfs all exclaimed. "I killed someone." The dwarf who had unleashed the attack also looked like he was about to cry. "I didn't do it on purpose. I was just so nervous that my hand shook." When everyone saw this, they grimaced, and felt that Chen Zhaotian had really died too tragically. A king tier, and he had actually died because an extreme weakling's hand had shaken? This was practically the biggest joke ever. Chapter 1817, Contesting for the Powerful Weapon. Chapter 1817, Contesting for the Powerful Weapon. A group of dwarfs were chattering excitedly there. Though they spoke very fiercely, they should not have killed anyone before, and now all of them were making a big fuss over it, as if the skies had collapsed and the earth had cracked open. And Bewitching Maiden Rue and the others all had strange expressions, and they really could not accept this. A mere shattering void tear had killed a king tier of severing mundane tear. What kind of absurd matter was this? Everyone's eyes were set on the staffs that these dwarfs were holding. It was because this thing had shown its power and Chen Zhaotian had been insta-killed with a single strike. What kind of treasure was this that could actually allow one to breach innumerable cultivation levels and succeed in making an ultimate kill? If this kind of thing could be used on a large scale, then the strength of a force would undergo an absolute revolution. Even if the power of this thing was only limited to dividing soul tier, when several hundred or several thousand attacked all at once, then even dividing soul tier great elites would have a slight headache, right? Then what if there were tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands? It was possible that even an immortal palace tier elite would have to make a strategic withdrawal. With such thoughts, the eyes of Bewitching Maiden Rue and the others shone brightly. Furthermore, more importantly, As long as they could take hold of a single staff, that meant that they would be invincible in this mystery realm. All of them were severing mundane tears, but this thing could kill a third severance as easily as killing a chicken. It would probably succeed easily against a fourth severance. If that was the case, who would be able to match them any longer? What Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun? In front of them, everyone would be trash. Furthermore, you didn't have a staff weapon, yet I did. That meant I had the absolute upper hand. How frightening would that intimidation tactic be? In the hands of these dwarfs, this staff weapon did not pose much of a threat. That was because though the beam of light that was shot out was so fast that it could not be dodged, a process of firing still had to take place. The instant that the trigger was pulled, with the speed of bewitching Maiden Ru and the others, they were completely capable of dodging. Previously, Chen Zhaotian had been hit only because he had been too careless, but who would believe that shattering void tear would actually be capable of threatening a severing mundane tear? But if this staff weapon had fallen into the hands of a severing mundane tear, then its threat level would undoubtedly increase millions and millions of times over. That was because even the process of firing would be practically negligible, and the difference between life and death would be decided in an instant. Everyone had a grim expression. If any one of them could snatch one of these staff weapons, that was equivalent to gaining possession of the ability to decide the life or death of others. In fact, they could kill anyone in a single instant. These people all showed their killing intent, and set their eyes on those dwarfs that were still feeling conflicted over having killed one of the giants by accident. In the eyes of these heirs, holy sons, and holy daughters of great sects and noble clans, there was no need to take the deaths of 1,000 or even 10,000 of these mere natives to heart. Beiyu Xiong was the first to make his move. He was a fourth severance peak stage king tier, and was sure that he could kill these dwarfs in an instant. He would not give them the slightest chance of resistance. Boom! He shot out a punch, and a frightening force surged out. The regulations of the Great Tao turned into a powerful storm that blasted out towards those dwarfs. With his strength, this would be an insta-kill. In fact, these dwarfs didn't even have the time to sense the approach of death. Peng! A loud bang rang out, and a powerful force suddenly split the air apart. Ling Han appeared in front of these dwarfs. One hand was put up in an attacking position. It was him that had sliced apart Beiyu Xiong's fatal attack, and saved the lives of these dwarfs. Merely in terms of battle prowess, Ling Han was still far from being a match for Beiyu Xiong. His figure was forcefully blasted back, and all the bones in his body cracked loudly. Even so, the dwarfs were still blown head over heels by the aftermath. Some were even seriously injured, and throwing up blood madly. In front of a fourth severance king tier, they were really much too weak. The giants turned bad. Attack! Attack! The dwarfs had all lost their heads in fear. They all raised the staffs in their hands. All of a sudden, multiple beams of light shot out, filling the skies with their brilliance. Since they already knew how frightening this object could be, bewitching Maiden Ru and the others were naturally long since prepared. They had long since used their movement techniques, and already dodged away before these beams of light had been shot out. By the time the beams of light were shot out, even they could not possibly dodge successfully. Thankfully, the dwarf still knew how to distinguish friend from foe, and did not attack Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han, you are actually assisting another race, humph, Beiyu Xiong declared coldly. At first, he could have insta-killed these natives with a single strike. What need would he have to dodge here and there like what he was doing now? Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and calmly said, I have no objection to contesting over treasures, but if it's something like killing the innocents, I cannot bring myself to do it, nor can I approve of it. Beiyu Xiong's expression was livid. Even Lin Fang and the others looked unconcerned. In their eyes, what were mere shattering void tears worth? They were so weak that they could not even be considered human. For a powerful weapon like the staff weapon, even if they had to slaughter an entire city, they would not have the slightest hesitation at all. This rule in this world was that the weak would be prey to the strong. Ling Han, with your kind of Tao heart, are you still qualified to pursue the pinnacle of cultivation? What a joke! Beiyu Xiong said in disdain, while his figure was flashing continuously. The attacks of the dwarfs surged forwards like floodwaters, and now the lights blazed. There was absolutely no way that they could come any closer. They were completely flying around randomly. Anyone who dared come close would definitely have as many holes as a beehive. Ling Han remained unmoved. These people had not managed to advance by striking the heaven and earth, so could it be that what they severed was their own conscience? As humans, we needed to have a bottom line. If there was no bottom line, humans could not be called humans, but could only be considered monsters. It was no wonder that one had to strike the heaven and earth to become a celestial king. Without that kind of presence, how could they be qualified to become the strongest in the world? Let's join forces, and see how he can save them all, Beiyu Xiong said to the others. Teng Sen, Lin Fang, and the others all nodded. Even if not for the sake of the great opportunity, and only for the sake of those staff weapons, they would have to move too. If they obtained one, then they would be able to gain a complete advantage in the hidden dragon mystery realm. At least, there was no need for them to fear anyone. Ling Han frowned. He was only one person, but there was no shortage of 4th Severance Peak Stage elites among Beiyu Xiong and the others. He himself had a strong physique, and needed not be afraid, but if any of these dwarfs was just scraped by the strong winds, they would definitely be beheaded or lose a limb. Moreover, the Empress was presently unable to match a 4th Severance, what more King tiers at 4th Severance Peak Stage. What to do now? The members of the Garuru tribe, all of you enter into my spatial god tool, Ling Han said. To hide the existence of the Black Tower, he had long since prepared a spatial god tool, and immediately threw that out. The dwarfs were a little bewildered. What the heck was a spatial god tool? There was actually no cultivation system at all in this place. By birth, they were already in the Shattering Void tier, and when they died, they would still be in the Shattering Void tier. They only knew how to use their staff weapons. Soft-hearted fool. Lin Fang and Teng Sen both made their moves. There were a total of 14 of them. Excluding Ling Han and the Empress, as well as Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun who had set off on their own and Chen Zhaotian who had died, only 9 remained. Now, aside from bewitching Maiden Ru, the others all showed twisted expressions as they unleashed their attacks respectively. With a powerful weapon like the staff weapon, even Ling Han's strong physique would not hold up to a single blow. Would you be able to stand up against the power of regulation of dividing soul tier? Bewitching Maiden Ru had a moment of conflict, and finally made her move. However, the target of her attack was not Ling Han and the Empress, or the dwarfs, but rather Beiyu Xiong and his group. Though she was a great bewitching maiden, a great demoness, she had her own bottom line. Chapter 1818, A Myriad Changes in an Instant. Chapter 1818, A Myriad Changes in an Instant. Ling Han and his group of 3 were battling Beiyu Xiong's group of 8. This was an unfair battle. Even if Ling Han's physique was strong, and he could be considered an immortal monster in the Severing Mundane tier, his battle prowess was a clear shortcoming. How could he possibly match 4th Severance Peak Stage King tiers? If there was only one such opponent, he could drag out the battle and kill the other through exhaustion with all his techniques, but now the other side had no intention of fighting with him, and only wanted to get him out of the way so they could make a move on the dwarfs. Ling Han could think of nothing to do about that. The Empress was also limited by her cultivation level, and could only just barely block one of their opponents. Thankfully, bewitching Maiden Ru was strong enough. She was a 4th Severance in the first place, and after she had advanced, she had already reached the 4th Severance Peak Stage, so she was no weaker than any King tier here. Added with her 9 revolutions charm physique and the cultivation technique of Purity Sect, she could hold back 2 4th Severance King tiers. But even so, there were too many enemies, and which one of them did not have the talent of a King tier? They had absolutely no intention to win the battle with Ling Han and his group. Instead, their focus was on killing those dwarfs. As long as they killed them, and took possession of those staff weapons, all their problems would be solved. Giants, I'll give you my sacred weapon. One of the dwarfs threw out the staff in his hands towards Ling Han. He was clearly a smart man, and made a decision that could turn the situation around. Haha, thanks a lot, a holy son said with a laugh. One of his hands held a rock, while the other hand was pointing at that staff that had been thrown out, and he softly exclaimed, "Exchange." Ling Han stretched out a hand to grab it, but space suddenly warped, and that flying staff weapon actually turned into a rock. He quickly turned to look at that holy sun, and the latter's hand was holding that staff weapon. Regulations of space. He had never thought that there was another person that had grasped regulations of space here, and that person had previously not shown any signs of it. All of them thought that he was specialized in regulations of fire. This holy sun's name was Tan Wei, and his cultivation level was 3rd Severance Peak Stage. Die. Tan Wei turned the staff weapon and aimed at Ling Han. Then, he pressed the staff weapon to shoot out the light of death just like the dwarfs did to kill Ling Han. Banish. Ling Han lowered a hand. Xiao, Tan Wei's entire person immediately disappeared without a trace, and he charged out using lightning flash. When his figure stopped, Tan Wei just happened to emerge out of the separate dimension. Tan Wei was a little dazed. He had not thought that Ling Han had actually grasped regulations of space too. Without even turning his head, he kicked his foot back. With how sensitive his divine sense was, he naturally could distinguish that Ling Han was presently standing behind him. Ling Han shot out a punch aimed at the back of Tan Wei's head. If this punch landed solidly, it was guaranteed that the latter would be absolutely dead. Don't even think about it. Lin Fang charged over. With a wave of her right hand, she shot out a black whip that wrapped towards Ling Han's right hand. This speed was extraordinarily fast. Before Ling Han's fist had landed, it had already wrapped around his hand. Wang, the whip was tightly pulled straight, but Ling Han's punch still did not manage to hit. It was only half an inch away from the back of Tan Wei's head. The strong winds it created had even blown Tan Wei's hair into a mess, and his locks danced wildly. Just at this moment, Tan Wei's foot had also arrived, aiming directly at Ling Han's lower abdomen. This kick was very fierce. It was clear that he was intending to cripple Ling Han's dantian. The moment the dantian was destroyed, Ling Han could only choose to give up this physical body. At the same time, Tan Wei was also turning his upper body, and the most powerful weapon naturally was still the staff weapon he was holding. This was the super weapon that could instantly decide the battle. Ling Han humphed, and drew the divine demon sword, slicing out towards the long whip. Wishful thinking. Lin Fang smirked coldly. This whip was produced from 2-star pseudo-divine metal being ripped into shreds and woven together with the tendons of an immortal beast. Its toughness had reached a chilling level, and it could be considered an ultimate treasure even among 2-star pseudo-celestial tools. And you actually want to slice it apart? You must be dreaming. Shua, the sword light flashed, and the divine demon sword reached the whip. Suddenly, a series of blinding sparks exploded. True enough, even the divine demon sword was unable to slice the whip apart, but Ling Han had already activated the divine demon sword, which was beginning to swallow the pseudo-divine metal inside the whip. In essence, even level 10 pseudo-divine metal was actually only level 20 godly metal. It was just that the latter had more layers. Since that was the case, what couldn't the divine demon sword swallow? Even 1/10 of a heartbeat had not passed, and this segment of pseudo-divine metal of the whip had already been swallowed and corroded. Then, Ling Han suddenly used the 9 heavens flame. Boom, the immortal flames blazed, and the immortal beast's tendons immediately turned soft. Then, the divine demon sword's sharpness took effect, slicing the whip in two. This seemed like a long process, but only took the time for 1/10 of a heartbeat. Ling Han's sword swept past, and the whip was sliced through. He regained his freedom, and with a sway of his figure, just managed to dodge this blow from Tan Wei. However, the staff weapon had still fallen into the hands of Beiyu Xiong and his group in the end. Xiao. Beiyu Xiong and the others all leaped over, surrounding Tan Wei defensively, and in the only remaining opening, Tan Wei raised the staff weapon, aiming directly at Ling Han. Ha. These 8 people were all laughing. In future, it was possible for life-and-death fights to erupt among them, but at this moment, they were united against the enemy. Both the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ru were charming and enchanting, and they could not bring themselves to kill them. Moreover, the 2 women were not as troublesome as Ling Han. That physique of his practically granted him immortality. Ling Han sighed. After all, there was still a gap of 2 minor levels between them, and added with their disadvantage in numbers, in the end, he was still unable to pull strongly against the tide. Do you feel regret now? Beiyu Xiong smirked coldly. You insist on being so hypocritical. Just who do you think you are? A king that is the savior of all life on earth? Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, whatever I do, I never regret. Then just die. Tan Wei howled. Previously, he had almost been killed by a single punch from Ling Han. To him, this was an excruciating humiliation. As the holy son of a powerful three-star sect, when had he ever experienced such shame? Everyone, what need is there for violence? Bewitching Maiden Ru bore an enchanting smile. At this moment, she had to use her charm techniques. With her active use of it, she had turned into an exquisite demoness, causing any man to burn just upon seeing her. Immediately, their bones would soften, and their willpower would drop to rock bottom, willing to submit to her every move and smile. Even if Beiyu Xiong and the others were king tiers, so what? In this moment, their hearts still throbbed madly. They didn't even remember who they were. Die. Lin Fang smirked coldly. She had long since harbored enmity toward the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ru, and now was her best chance. She snatched Tan Wei's staff weapon in a single move, and aimed directly at bewitching Maiden Ru. Under normal conditions, Tan Wei would definitely not have allowed her to succeed so easily. However, who asked him to presently be completely enraptured, his reflexes had directly slowed tens of thousands of times over. Realization only dawned on him after Lin Fang had successfully grabbed the staff weapon. Bewitching Maiden Ru immediately paled. Who amongst them had not witnessed the terrifying destructive power of this staff weapon? Killing a third Severance peak stage king tier was like harvesting grass. Though she was a fourth Severance, the results probably wouldn't be that much better. No. Beiyu Xiong and the others also reacted, and hurriedly called out. How could such an exquisite, seductive beauty be allowed to be killed? Lin Fang showed a twisted grin. She admired bewitching Maiden Ru's pretty face that had turned pale and the horror in her eyes. Then, without hesitation, she pressed the staff weapon. Shio, a beam of light shot out. A figure flashed, and stood in front of bewitching Maiden Ru in the instant Lin Fang pulled the trigger. Chapter 1819, Killed by a Trap. Chapter 1819, Killed by a Trap. This was none other than Ling Han. The beam of light had entered completely into his body, but no one noticed that it had not shot out of Ling Han's body. What everyone had seen was that he had stepped out and taken a strike for bewitching Maiden Ru, and now, his body was bent over, his hands gripping his lower abdomen, and his expression extremely agonized. Ha 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 ha. Beiyu Xiong and his group roared with laughter after a moment's pause. Didn't die, the bewitching Maiden Ru did not die, and that was good enough. I didn't think that you are also a romantic fool. Too bad, your life will also end with this, Ting Sen said. He should have died long ago. Beiyu Xiong smirked coldly, his gaze flickering slightly. He had an idea. He wanted to snatch Ling Han's corpse, and he could claim credit from Zihei Bingyun in future with that in his possession. Though this staff weapon possessed obliterating destructive power that could even possibly kill dividing soul tier elites, who would believe that this could match a celestial king? Thus, he still wanted to enter under the banner of a celestial king tier sect, and if that happened, he would naturally flourish. Give me back my precious weapon. Tan Wei finally realized what had happened, and stretched out a hand to grab the staff weapon, but how could Lin Fang possibly hand it over to him? Her palm descended in a palm strike, and he was thrown back forcefully by her cultivation level of fourth severance. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Ru's small mouth was gaping open as she looked dumbly at the man that was standing in front of her. He had his back towards her, and she couldn't see his face, yet he had still decisively used his body to protect her. She had been flattered by who knew how many men with how long she had been alive, and which one of them had not made solemn vows that they were willing to sacrifice their lives for her, but when she had really been in desperate straits, which one of them had stepped out to protect her? Only Ling Han, a man who had never fawned on or complimented her, but had used his mountain-like body to protect her. In this instant, bewitching Maiden Ru's heart practically melted. She felt her vision blur, and tears streamed unwillingly from her eyes. Had she fallen in love with Ling Han? Perhaps not yet, but it could not be denied that she had really been touched to the extreme at this moment. You are a member of our Ling clan, so husband would definitely protect you. Behind her, the Empress's voice rang out. Bewitching Maiden Rue turned her head, and saw that the Empress was all smiles. She did not have the slightest bit of grief in her expression. You are a bit too cold-hearted, aren't you? Your man has already been killed, and you are actually still smiling? What kind of wife are you? Beiyu Xiong showed an expression of malice. Xiao, he pounced out, leaping out towards Ling Han. He had made his decision, he was going to take Ling Han's corpse. Damn it! Bewitching Maiden Rue rebuked harshly, and was just about to launch an attack at Beiyu Xiong, yet was restrained by the Empress. Initially, it was the former that was stronger, but when the Empress's stern eyes passed over her, it intimidated her spirit, and she involuntarily stopped. Beiyu Xiong saw this, and his lips quirked up involuntarily in a grin. In his eyes, the Empress had clearly given up on Ling Han. Exactly, what was there to miss about a dead man? With such a practical nature, it should not be too difficult for him to take her into his harem. He pounced over, and stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han. But just at this moment, an incredibly panicked expression appeared on his face. That was because he saw that Ling Han had smiled at him. He had to be seeing things. Beiyu Xiong immediately realized something was off, but it was already too late. A fist penetrated his chest, and an indescribable coldness invaded his divine sense instantly, such that he could not come up with any other thought. Then, the fire of his spirit had also been frozen and eternally extinguished. A great fourth Severance Peak stage King Tier had actually been insta-killed with a single blow. How could this be? He looked at Ling Han's face, and stretched out a hand as if he wanted to grab Ling Han, and get to the bottom of this matter. Ling Han did not move, but Beiyu Xiong's hand could not touch him at all. It had already dropped down weakly. Only then did he grit his teeth, and with one hand gripping onto his lower abdomen, he said, "Wife, don't speak nonsense. Ayo, it damn hurts." There were 2 source powers inside his body, and no regulations could possibly overwhelm him with a superior level, so they naturally couldn't kill him. However, that deathlight was a manifestation of source power, after all, so it still caused him much pain, and he couldn't get his breath back even after so long. There was no sound in the surroundings at all, everyone had turned into stone. Monster. You are definitely AF*** King Monster. Didn't you see that Chen Zhaotian had been turned into a pile of dirt just from being hit once, and you actually just feel a little pain? Furthermore, you took advantage of the opening to lay a trap for Beiyu Xiong, and killed this 4th Severance King Tier. Actually, it was Beiyu Xiong himself who was to blame. Why did you go and try to snatch his corpse for? Fine then, now it was you that had been turned into a corpse. The Empress suddenly showed an expression of heartache, and hurriedly supported Ling Han. Thankfully, Ling Han managed to channel the 9 Heavens Flame and Shenyan Source Water in time, so this blow didn't even manage to penetrate his clothes at all. You scared me. She slapped Ling Han's shoulder lightly. Ling Han chuckled, and grabbed the Empress's hand. Seeing them so expectant, I had to reluctantly accommodate them in the act. After all, they already had their expressions long prepared, so I had to give them some face at least. Fuck, so apparently, you were just playing us like fools? Everyone's face was black. The worst off was naturally Beiyu Xiong, who had directly been killed by Ling Han's trap. Otherwise, with his strength as a 4th Severance Peak stage King Tier, how could he have possibly died in Ling Han's hands? Worse come to worst, he could have run. With a gap of 2 minor levels, wouldn't it be a simple thing for him to have run? But why was Ling Han capable of sustaining a strike from the staff weapon and surviving? Not only had he not died, he wasn't even the slightest bit wounded. It was as if that actually wasn't the light of death at all, but a genuine shattering void tier level attack. He had just been completely playing around. How could you be all right? Tan Wei asked dumbly. This was really too much of a shock to him. Ling Han shrugged, and asked, You want to know? Come then, 10,000 catties of top-grade Saint metal in exchange for a single question. Everyone can line up, that's not right, I can kill all of you, so all of that would be mine, wouldn't it? Why should I do more than is required? These people had previously wanted to kill him so they could claim credit from Zihei Bingyun. They had just been intimidated by his powerful strength and tough physique later on, and had thus reined in their horses in the nick of time, but now they were restless again, so why should he still have to be polite with them? Bad giants, attack! Attack! At this moment, the dwarfs had also come back to their senses. As they clamored, their attacks were launched again. Lin Fang and the others hurriedly dodged, but they, too, possessed a staff weapon, and immediately proceeded to counterattack. It landed on one of the dwarfs. Its speed was really too fast. Even Ling Han didn't know whom they were aiming at, so it was not possible for him to block the attack. I've been hit, that dwarf yowled, but he actually didn't turn into dirt, either, and was merely yowling out endlessly. This was also a monster. Lin Fang and the others were all king tiers of the present generation, prodigies of prodigies, so realization immediately dawned on them. These dwarfs were naturally resistant to this light of death. It could wound them, but if they wanted to use this to kill them, it would be difficult. The battle royal had begun, incredibly intense. Ling Han, bewitching Maiden Ru, and the Empress also took a staff weapon each, and launched an offensive against Lin Fang and her group. It was absolute chaos. They similarly only needed to pull the trigger to launch an attack, but how could the speed of Ling Han and his group be anything that could be matched by those dwarfs? Chapter 1820, The Treasure Mountain Opens Its Doors. Chapter 1820, The Treasure Mountain Opens Its Doors. Retreat! 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 Lin Fang and the others all yelled. With the aid of the staff weapon, Ling Han and his group were too frightening. They could not be matched at all. This was what the saying "the few are no match for the many" meant. They only had a single staff weapon, and their disadvantage in numbers was too great. Furthermore, Ling Han and those dwarfs had a strong immunity to the light of death, so how were they supposed to play this? In the end, only 3 managed to retreat successfully, and they were Lin Fang, Teng Sen, and Wei Yan. The others had all been killed by the light of death, and turned into dirt. We won. The dwarfs raised their hands and cheered. Let's drink. Lay out a feast. Celebrate. These dwarfs had no awareness of suffering at all, and did not worry in the slightest that Lin Fang and the others would make a comeback. Neither did they realize that the gap between the cultivation level of both sides was like the gap between heaven and earth. If they had not had the help of Ling Han and his group, they would definitely have been completely eliminated in an instant. Even if they had the staff weapons, it would be no use. Ling Han and his group were also treated to warm hospitality from the dwarfs. Bewitching Maiden Ru was a little displeased. She was touched by Ling Han's action of sacrificing himself to protect her, but the latter was not even the slightest bit wounded, which made her feel like she had been deceived. You didn't move for such a long period of time. Were you deliberately cheating me out of my sympathy and tears? However, it could not be denied. Ling Han had indeed saved her life, and this was a favor that she would have to recognize. Want to repay the favor? The Empress raised the bewitching Maiden Ru's delicate chin. Then serve my husband in bed tonight. Bewitching Maiden Ru blushed furiously. You are really too unreserved, aren't you? But what might be a perverted line from the mouths of others seemed like a golden rule when it was spoken by the Empress's mouth. It was filled with dignity, and made others feel like their own wish was to obey strictly. This was the enchantment of the Empress. Ling Han shook his head and forced a laugh. Why was the Empress constantly thinking of getting hold of the 9 revolutions charm physique? Could it be that he would not be able to ascend to the summit if he did not have the aid of the 9 revolutions charm physique? However, something that the Empress had set her mind on was clearly nothing he could stop. Thus, Ling Han couldn't even bother himself to advise her otherwise, and merely directed questions at the dwarfs. These dwarfs did not have any consciousness of guarding against others by nature, and furthermore, because they had fought with Ling Han on the same side, they were filled with trust towards him. If they knew the answer, they would reply to all questions he asked. They called the staff weapons they had in their hands sacred weapons, which they had obtained from a mountain cavern, and what caused Ling Han incredible surprise was the fact that these dwarfs were actually not born through the normal method, but had originated from that mountain cave themselves. Every 100 years, they would enter into the mountain cave, and carry out a few dwarfs that had just been born. Then, they would bury those dwarfs that had died of old age inside that mountain cave. Ling Han came up with a guess. Actually, these dwarfs were manifestations of the source power of Earth. The heavenly Tao Jade was a source power of the heaven and earth, so what kind of valuable existence was it? And Earth was the mother of all life, so what would be so strange about it having birthed such earth spirits? The proof was the fact that they had all been born in the cave, as well as being completely fine even after being hit with the light of death from their staff weapons. They were one and the same in the first place, and had both originated from a certain power of the heavenly Tao Jade. Ling Han proposed a request to go to the mountain cave, which met with the objections of a part of the Garuru tribe, but there were also a few dwarfs that expressed agreement. Ling Han had provided them extremely great help, so how could they refuse the request of their benefactor? In the end, these dwarfs said they needed to have a discussion, ask the tribe elders to make a divination, ask the spirits of their ancestors, and so on. Only then would they be able to give Ling Han a reply. Ling Han did not rush them. Though these dwarfs didn't have a very high cultivation level, they had possession of various techniques, and could not be underestimated. Who knew, that mountain cave might contain a powerful weapon, right? He, the Empress, and bewitching maiden Ru thus settled down, and waited for the result of the discussions of the dwarfs. Ling Han and the Empress entered into the Black Tower. They had already reached the second Severance Peak stage. They only had to push aside the barrier of their cultivation level, and would be able to deliver the third Severance, and their battle prowess would naturally soar innumerable times. They only had to advance into the third Severance, and they would not have to be wary of anyone else within this mystery realm. Under normal conditions, this was impossible. It would have to take at least tens of thousands of years of accumulation at least. If your comprehension ability was poor, then it would be hundreds of thousands, or millions and millions of years, and you still might not be able to break through. But Ling Han had the reincarnation tree, and more importantly, after the reincarnation tree had been reborn, its effects had also been improved a good few times. Coincidentally, Ling Han had also just gotten hold of a few fruits. The reincarnation tree bore fruit very rarely, but as the source of all plants, the fruits that it bore had to be at the celestial medicines level. Even if this present reincarnation tree had been grown from accelerated growth, so the effects of its fruits were not as expected, they were still celestial treasures. Ling Han and the Empress divided 4 celestial fruits between the two of them. Then, they comprehended Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. They hoped to complete the breakthrough in the shortest time possible. 7 days later, Ling Han and the Empress exited seclusion. Though neither of them had made a breakthrough, both of them had gained an extremely great certainty. They only had to enter into seclusion once more, and they were 90% certain that they could deliver the third Severance. Unfortunately, the celestial medicines had been expended. After all, they couldn't consume the 7 lives divine clouds too, right? That mutated celestial medicine. Ling Han recalled that celestial medicine that had taken the form of a rabbit with the head of a wolf. If that could be refined, then he and the Empress should be able to advance into the third Severance. The discussions of the Garuru tribe had also come to an end. They agreed to let Ling Han and his group into the mountain caves, but there was a prerequisite condition: they had to harvest a mountain treasure as sacrifice. In these mountains, there were some rocks that had gained consciousness and become mountain spirits, and they were called mountain treasures. In the eyes of the Garuru tribe, mountain treasures were the best sacrificial item. Furthermore, aside from the specific time every century, even dwarfs were not able to enter into the caves. They could only do so by using a mountain treasure, which meant that the dwarfs did not mean to cause trouble for Ling Han and his group at all. Ling Han and his group definitely would not be able to wait as long as 100 years. After more than 9 years, the restrictive power of the volcano would vanish, and this place would turn back into a zone of violence, and only the living creatures native to this place would be able to survive. Thus, Ling Han and the Empress immediately set out, and bewitching maiden Ru also chose to follow them. What reason was there for her to stay behind in the village? Let's make things clear. Saving you is one thing, traveling together is also one thing, but don't even think that we are going to divide our treasures with you, Ling Han stated solemnly. Bewitching maiden Ru couldn't help but grit her teeth. The treasure hasn't even appeared yet, and you are already drawing a clear dividing line between us. Damn, man, why had he saved her previously? She was very defiant. With her charm, any man should be running around her in circles, and agree to whatever she said. Even if she made any excessive request, she merely needed to smile and make an appeal in a soft tone, and there logically should be nothing that they could deny her. Why had she encountered this kind of guy? Bewitching maiden Rue looked towards the Empress. It had to be admitted that if any man possessed this kind of exquisite celestial maiden, he would definitely develop an immunity towards other women. Even a great bewitching maiden like herself was no exception. But she was still unreconciled. There was no man that the purity sect could not conquer. If she did not turn this man into her willing subject, she was afraid that this would become a lingering shadow in her heart, and she would not have any hopes of breaking through to the dividing soul tier ever in this lifetime. Damn man, then let's come and have a battle. I don't believe that I will not be able to make you submit. Chapter 1821, Search. Chapter 1821, Search. Ling Han and his group began searching in the mountains. As for the tribe of dwarfs, Ling Han had already advised them to be careful. With the help of the staff weapons, they should not encounter too much trouble. The three of them listened to the description of the Gururu tribe. The mountain treasure was buried underground, and some were even as deep as tens of meters deep. Aside from hunting, the daily lives of these dwarfs also included excavating mountain treasures, though their gains were very, very limited. Furthermore, these dwarfs were really too sincere and honest. Whenever they dug out a mountain treasure, they would anxiously rush to offer it as a sacrifice, and had no concept of savings. In general, mountain treasures were very easily recognizable. They would by themselves emit light that was milky white in color, and there seemed to be some kind of transparent liquid flowing in them as well. Previously, there had been an outrageously bold member of the Gururu tribe who had opened the mountain treasure and drunk this liquid, and he had died directly. From then onwards, no other member of the Gururu tribe dared to joke around with the mountain treasure, and they thought that this was a punishment from the gods. With the ability of Ling Han and his group, they could very easily topple mountains and overturn seas, but this mountain was different. It was too firm. Ling Han attempted to blast open the mountain rocks, yet that did not have any good result at all. Thus, he could only slowly dig like any other ordinary person. The inefficiency of this was astonishing. It could be claimed that it was completely up to luck. There was nothing to be done. The three of them tried their best, searching around for the mountain treasure. Bewitching maiden Rue had even said in a moment of anger that if she was the one to discover the mountain treasure, she would definitely not bring Ling Han with her into the mountain cave. Ling Han's only response was hair. Small tower, can you guess what that mountain treasure is? Ling Han asked. Since he had something that could help him cheat, why should he not use it? Small tower pondered for a while, and then said, that could possibly be the cave spirit treasured jade, something formed from a sliver of the essence of the heavenly Tao source rock being nurtured. That is why it can help to open up the cave that contains the heavenly Tao jade. Are you sure that that mountain cave contains the heavenly Tao jade? 99% sure. Small tower nodded. Since the heavenly Tao jade is formed, only a celestial king technique can resist it. What you have to be careful of are that brat and girl from those two celestial king tier forces. The others could not possibly retrieve it. Can you find the mountain treasure? Ling Han asked again. If I'm close enough, I can sense it, Small Tower said. How close? Maybe within 3 meters. This scope was really too small. However, compared with having to overturn the entire mountain, the advantage of having to dig 3 meters deep was overwhelming. Ling Han nodded, and used his movement technique, beginning to circle around in the mountains. If the mountain treasure was within the scope of less than 3 meters under the surface, then Small Tower would be able to sense it. Compared to digging, circling around the mountain was innumerable times easier. Unfortunately, after he had done a full circle, Small Tower did not have any reaction. Ling Han was exasperated, and could only play the role of miner, beginning to clear the area. It seemed to be all rocks here, and there was a pitifully small amount of sand. Furthermore, the rocks were extraordinarily hard, and he had to refine them with the power of regulation, so the slowness of his progress could be imagined. Thankfully, Ling Han and his group had borrowed the staff weapons, which could save them a considerable amount of energy. But even so, it was still exceedingly slow. And with such work, more than 5 months had passed. The 3 young king tiers had eventually laid down their pride, and earnestly did the heavy manual labor. "Brat, head left," Small Tower suddenly said. Ling Han faltered for a moment, and then showed an expression of delighted surprise. "You found something?" Small Tower was impatient, and demanded, "I told you to head left, so just do it. Why do you have so much nonsense to spout? Would it die if it was not Sunder?" Ling Han still began digging leftwards, but he had just begun when Small Tower said, "You've gone too far, head right a bit." After a few attempts, Small Tower finally stopped making any noise, and allowed Ling Han to advance forwards. Now slower. After advancing slightly more than 1.5 meters, Small Tower spoke up again. Ling Han slowed his movements as asked. The staff weapon could possibly damage the cave spirit treasured jade, so he decisively gave up the staff weapon, and only used his bare hands, beginning to dig at the rocks. His hands were wrapped in regulations, and were like iron spades. Though they were not as indestructible as the staff weapon, the advantage was that he had full control over the power. If a jade suddenly emerged from a rock, he would not damage it. In only a while, Ling Han saw something bright. He had discovered a beautiful jade. It was indeed as what the dwarfs had said. This rock was completely milky white, and seemed slightly transparent. One could vaguely see liquid flowing inside it, as if it had a life of its own. "This is indeed a cave spirit treasured jade," Small Tower said. "Is this a treasure?" Ling Han asked. "Of course, it is formed from having absorbed a sliver of the source power of Earth, and even an ascending origin tier would be tempted by it." Ling Han suddenly understood. That dwarf had died after he had consumed the marrow fluid, not because the treasure fluid was poisonous, but because its medicinal effects were too strong, and he had directly died from being overnourished. Those dwarfs were only in the shattering void tier. Though they had an unclear relationship with the heavenly Dao Jade, they could not possibly ignore the restrictions of their cultivation level entirely. After all, this was being directed consumed into the body, and having the light of death land on your body was completely incomparable. Too bad, this thing had to be used to open the caves. Otherwise, he could save it for his own use. As the saying went, one could not get a greater profit without making some sacrifices. Using this to trade for the heavenly Dao Jade, and advancing into the 5th severance, this significance surpassed all else. Ling Han carefully dug out this cave spirit treasured jade, and it felt warm in his hand, and there was even a slight wriggly feeling. "Put down the mountain treasure," an icy voice rang out. Though it was very melodious, it was filled with killing intent. A person was standing behind Ling Han, and even with how sensitive Ling Han's divine sense was, he actually did not discover how she had approached him. The strength of her abilities and excellence of her techniques were truly shocking. Zihei Bingyun, the heir of a celestial king tier clan. It was no wonder she had such techniques. Ling Han slowly turned around and faced Zihei Bingyun directly. She had a staff in her hand, and the staff's tip was aimed at him. It was the weapon of the Gururu tribe. Clearly, she had also found out how this powerful weapon could be used. A sliver of a cold smirk turned up the corners of her lips, as if she was mocking him. Being threatened by such a powerful weapon, Ling Han could only submit. Why did she not make a move? That was because she worried that she would destroy the mountain treasure along with him. Thus, she would wait until Ling Han handed over the mountain treasure, and then deal him a fatal blow. Ling Han frowned slightly, and his killing intent seeped out. "You've committed murder," he said. "I sense a powerful air of blood, and further, it's not just one." He suddenly became very furious. "You massacred that village of dwarfs. This demented woman." Zihei Bingyun's expression was filled with disdain. What was the big deal about having massacred a village of dwarfs? They were only shattering void tier natives, and weren't even qualified to be noted in her memory. She raised a brow, and said, "Stop blabbering, and hand over the mountain treasure quickly." This man was too despicable. He actually caused her to expose her hip in public. Not only he would have to die, Every single person who had witnessed it would have to die. Ling Han gripped his hand into a fist, and coldly said, "Then trade your life for it. Die." Zihei Bingyun slanted the staff weapon slightly. Xiao, a beam of light shot out, shooting towards Ling Han's right leg. This was a warning. Chapter 1822 Reappearance of the Celestial Medicine. Chapter 1822 Reappearance of the Celestial Medicine. The speed of the light of death was too quick. To say nothing of a severing mundane tear, it was probable that even dividing soul tear might not be able to evade this strike. Thus, this beam of light naturally landed on Ling Han's leg directly. Ling Han stood proudly, like a boulder. This. Zihei Bingyun's face was instantly filled with shock, her small mouth involuntarily widening into an "oh." This was something that she could not understand, could not believe, and could not accept. How could this be? Ling Han humphed, and he charged over. Demented woman, I will use your head to offer apologies to the Garuru tribe. You overestimate your own capabilities. Zihei Bingyun declared in disdain. She had already regained her senses from her previous astonishment. She was, after all, a king among kings. He actually dared demand that she be buried next to them. She was the heir of a celestial king tier clan, a future empress of the skies, so how noble and dignified was she? So what if you managed to block the staff weapon? Can you match me in battle prowess? Zihei Bingyun fought fiercely with Ling Han. She had full confidence in herself. She had only used the staff weapon as a threat so she could save herself some effort. After all, Ling Han's physique was too tough, and she was well aware of that fact. Which celestial king tier force are you a descendant of? She asked. If that was not the case, without having the brand of a celestial king into his body, how could he possibly be able to resist the regulations of the great Tao that were formed from the source power of Earth? And this was why the staff weapon was so frightening. It was equivalent to a celestial king using techniques. Without a height of regulations that was its equal in level, there was no way to resist it at all. Humph, if it's not a celestial king tier force, you can freely slaughter whoever you please. Ling Han also used the staff weapon, and as the light of death ***, Zihei Bingyun similarly could not dodge, and was blasted head-on. However, Zihei Bingyun looked like she was completely fine. As she attacked madly, she asked in disdain, "Do you think that you are the only one that has been bestowed supreme regulations by a celestial king?" Realization dawned on Ling Han. It was no wonder she guessed that he was the descendant of a celestial king tier force. Since the staff weapon was ineffective, Ling Han decisively put it away, and brandished his fists, using 9 Heavens Flame and Shenyan Source Water, and beginning an exchange of blows with Zihei Bingyun. However, while the staff weapon could allow a group of shattering Void tier natives to insta-kill a third Severance King tier, the same trick clearly could not be used on those like Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun. Going by the look of things, it was still the source power of heaven and earth that was more powerful. When he thought about it, it was true. Just how many source powers of heaven and earth were there, and just how many celestial kings were there in comparison? Or in other words, if a celestial king wanted to grant this kind of destructive power to others, he himself would have to pay an extremely great price. To grant a descendant the ability to insta-kill just a severing mundane tier or dividing soul tier, the celestial king would have to make this kind of sacrifice. Which celestial king would be that foolish? Ling Han and Zihei Bingyun exchanged blows. In terms of battle prowess, he clearly was at a disadvantage, but with the might of the two great source powers, he was not much too inferior. Zihei Bingyun smirked coldly. Even if he had been bestowed supreme regulations by a celestial king, how could he be able to use them without limits? Just look at her. By now, she had only used this kind of regulations to protect herself, but did not use them in attack. That was because this was something that could be expended fully. And it was not that she did not hate Ling Han, but rather that she wanted to use these precious regulations when she fought for the heavenly Tao Jade. Otherwise, without the celestial king tier regulations protecting herself, there would be no way that she could take hold of such a treasure. With Ling Han being so extravagant with his use of them now, as soon as he had expended his power of regulation completely, what else could he match her with? And on what basis would he take possession of the heavenly Tao Jade? Idiot! What celestial king tier force had produced such an idiot? But when she thought about it, this brat seemed to be extremely treacherous. He was clearly a descendant of a celestial king tier force, yet actually went to become a subordinate at a 3-star force, and she had almost been deceived. You despicable villain! Zihei Bingyun rebuked. How was this guy a worthy descendant of a celestial king? He actually gave out half-truths. Ling Han did not dispute her words. What good was it to bicker with a dead person? Since his killing intent was already spiked, then who cared if she was a man or woman? No matter how beautiful she looked, it could not possibly cause him to feel the slightest bit of mercy. Die. The two of them fought intensely, and the more Zihei Bingyun fought, the more shocked she was. Logically speaking, with the rate that Ling Han was expending them at, the Celestial King tier regulations should have already been expended fully. No matter what, there was no way he could continue to use them like they were completely unlimited. This was an impossible thing. It should be known that though the power of Celestial King was endless, they were only in the severing mundane tier, after all, so there was a limit to the regulations they could sustain. If too many regulations of the Great Tao were sealed in them, it would create a very great burden on them, and they could even explode and die from it. She had used her own situation to make an estimate. Ling Han's expense of regulations had definitely reached the volume that was sealed into her body. Then, why could he still use them after that? Could it be that because his physique was stronger, he had more regulations sealed into his body? Was this possible? That was Celestial King tier regulations, so what use would a stronger physique be? In the face of Celestial King tier regulations, did 1 mark and 100 marks have any difference? They would both be overwhelmed. This battle continued progressing, and Zihei Bingyun's shock gradually increased further. That was because Ling Han was too extravagant with his use of Celestial King tier regulations, just like a super spendthrift. She could not understand, and could only feel shocked. What was even more unacceptable to her was that her Celestial King tier regulations were also heavily expended, and she had already used half of them. If the battle continued, it was possible that she would not have enough to retrieve the heavenly Tao Jade. Just you wait. She tossed out these words, and left in a leap. She could not continue to waste Celestial King tier regulations here. Ling Han did not set out in pursuit. Even if he managed to catch up to her, it would be no use. He similarly could do nothing against Zihei Bingyun. He definitely had to break through to the third severance. Ling Han mentally vowed. He had had that idea in the first place, and now when he thought about the fact that the village of dwarfs had possibly been slaughtered by Zihei Bingyun, the killing intent in his heart was boundless. He, the Empress, and bewitching maiden Ru rushed back to the village of dwarfs, but discovered that this place was already scattered all over with corpses, and they could not find even a single survivor. This demented woman. Ling Han's eyes swept over the scene, his whole body trembling slightly. Though he had not spent much time with the dwarfs, he admired the sincerity and hospitality of the dwarfs very much. He would definitely not have imagined that when he came back, he would actually witness such a scene. Zihei Bingyun, if I don't kill you, my heart will be unable to rest easy. Ling Han stared at the distant skies, practically spitting out each word. Xiao, it was just at this moment that the earth suddenly cracked apart, and a rabbit suddenly shot out. However, it had the head of a wolf. It opened its mouth wide, and like a bottomless hole, it was about the size of 21 to 24 meters as it aimed a bite at Ling Han. It was that mutated celestial medicine. This fellow really appeared and disappeared unpredictably, and was skilled at stealth, deceiving the divine sense of Ling Han and his group altogether. Furthermore, it was also quite intelligent. The time at which it unleashed its attack just happened to be a time when Ling Han was feeling incredibly furious, a strong ripple appearing in his divine sense. Then, the attack arrived. Though Ling Han had been surprised, he broke into a sliver of a smile instead. He was only afraid that this celestial medicine would never appear again. If that happened, he would not be able to take it, but the moment it appeared, he would at least have some hope. This celestial medicine had also devoured a bit of the behind of the 7 lives divine clouds, so no matter what, he had to seek an accounting for this debt. The celestial medicine swallowed, and Ling Han instantly disappeared from sight. The rabbit's head immediately returned to its original size. The wolf's head was salivating. It wanted to refine Ling Han, and then extract the 7 lives divine clouds. Chapter 1823 Success. Chapter 1823 Success. This celestial medicine's intelligence was really not low. It knew how to make use of its advantages. It was practically undetectable underground, and took advantage of the opening when Ling Han's emotions were the most turbulent to suddenly attack. It could be claimed that its timing was extremely spot on. And true enough, it had swallowed Ling Han in a single gulp. It was confident in its extraordinariness. Swallow was the second ability that it had developed, and allowed it to refine everything. Now that he had entered into its mouth, it meant that everything was over. It lazily cradled a carrot, and carelessly chewed on it, and did not even look at the Empress and bewitching Maiden Rue directly. Bewitching Maiden Rue was astonished. What kind of thing was this rabbit? Its plump white body was very cute, but it actually had a hideous wolf's head, and had actually swallowed Ling Han in a single mouthful. That tiny body was actually capable of accommodating Ling Han's size. After being stunned for a moment, she immediately charged to attack the rabbit, and demanded, "Hand him over." Ling Han had saved her life, and this was a great favor. The Empress was also in a thunderous fury. She was not worried that Ling Han was in life-threatening danger, but this celestial medicine actually dared to swallow her husband. This was really too outrageously bold. She immediately formed her 9 doppelgangers, and they attacked the celestial medicine madly. The rabbit broke into a run. It still had the regulations of lightning, so its speed was extremely fast. Even if the Empress used lightning flash, she could only stare in stupefaction from behind. However, it only ran a short way, and then its paws suddenly paused. The wolf's head opened up, showing an expression of pain. A bump suddenly appeared on its stomach, as if someone had punched it from the inside. Furthermore, this shape was clearly the shape of a fist, and the hit was so hard that the rabbit hopped a little forwards. The Empress and bewitching Maiden Rue caught up with it, and a round of mad blows instantly rained down on it. Merely in terms of battle prowess, celestial medicines were actually very weak. They only possessed some strange mystical powers, such as hiding underground or running very fast. But this celestial medicine was an exception. It had mutated and possessed the ability of swallowing. But this did not mean that its battle prowess was strong. Aside from biting, it really couldn't do much of anything else. Aching from being pummeled by the Empress and bewitching Maiden Rue, it suddenly exploded in fury, and opened its wolf's head wide again, biting at the 2 women. However, its mouth had just opened when a gigantic fist waved out of its mouth. Then, the fist turned around, and landed heavily on its face. Peng! The rabbit was immediately sent flying from the harsh impact. Peng! 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 Without waiting for it to land on the ground, innumerable fists appeared on its body, and they had all been shot out from its inside. In fact, there was even sword chi dancing, causing great damage to it. The worst thing that it could have done was swallow Ling Han. He was a man that had 2 source powers, as well as a top-tier precious treasure like the Black Tower. Was he anyone that it could swallow? It could only suffer the consequences of its own actions. Peng! The rabbit's chest was torn open forcefully from the blows, and a figure shot out. It was Ling Han. The moment he appeared, he stretched out a hand to snatch the carrot that the rabbit had in its paws. That was the main body of the celestial medicine, and this wolf-headed rabbit was only formed from its leaves and stalks at most. The rabbit struggled with all its might, yet could not struggle free no matter how hard it tried. It frantically twisted its wolf's head in its panic, wanting to bite Ling Han. Humph! Ling Han used source power, and under the suppression from the 2 great celestial king tier level powers of regulation, that celestial medicine immediately became obedient. Kill it! 7 lives divine clouds jumped out. Its behind had almost been devoured by this celestial medicine, and now that they had captured the culprit, it naturally had to come out and watch it get its punishment to vent out its fury. No, no, no! It's not enough to just kill it. Bite its bottom, bite it to death. The celestial medicine was stomping around in fury. It had never experienced such great suffering before this. The celestial medicine with a rabbit's body was extremely violent. Though it had been suppressed, it was still determinedly opening its mouth. Furthermore, its eyes were set on the 7 lives divine clouds. If it were not for this celestial medicine, it would not have taken the risk. In its consciousness, swallowing other celestial medicines could stimulate its evolution. Longing was powerful. This was written in the blood of every single living creature. Ling Han looked towards the Empress, and said, "I want to enter into seclusion and attempt the 3rd severance." The Empress nodded, and said, "All right." She knew that Ling Han was seriously angry now, and vowed to kill Zihe Bingyun. She naturally was fully supportive of this action. With a flash, Ling Han had entered into the Black Tower. Underneath the reincarnation tree, he began to refine the celestial medicine with a rabbit's body. This celestial medicine had mutated, and it could not be treated like a pure celestial medicine, but had rather stepped on the path of cultivation. However, its path of cultivation was unlike that of human cultivators. Instead, its growth was dependent on swallowing its own kind. It did not cultivate origin power, and merely depended on regulations. Thus, it could not possibly supply any accumulation of origin power, but only provide the comprehension of regulations, and this was also what Ling Han presently needed the most. The celestial medicine with a rabbit's body struggled. From a certain aspect, it was a cultivator, so it was naturally unwilling to be refined by others. But who asked it to have been greedy? It actually took the initiative to make a move on Ling Han, and the result was that it had delivered itself up to its death. With its violent nature, Ling Han would not have the slightest bit of mercy. It was unlike the 7 lives divine clouds, which he would rather not consume, and would rear it inside the Black Tower so that he could harvest a little bit of celestial fluid every millennium. This was also the way of doing things of most factions. That was because it was too time-consuming to nurture a celestial medicine right from the very beginning. Though consuming a little bit of herbal essence was inferior to directly consuming the entire celestial medicine in effect, the advantage was that a thin stream would flow forever. All the forces with vision would do this. Under Ling Han's refining, the celestial medicine with a rabbit's body finally showed its true appearance. That was a ginseng, but the body of the ginseng was covered with frightening symbols, causing wariness to sprout in the heart of anyone who set eyes upon it. This was a mutated, or rather a demonized celestial medicine. Ling Han did not consume it. Instead, he directly extracted the essence from within. Multiple regulations surged out, interweaving and creating a resonance with him. He was more focused on cultivating the regulations of fire and water. If this celestial medicine was of either of these 2 elements, Ling Han would definitely benefit more, and it would be faster when he refined it because he had the source power as foundation. But now, though it was not ideal enough, celestial medicine was connected with the heaven and earth, so even if the regulations did not match, that was fine. It could still open the doors of heavenly Tao for him so that he could communicate with the Tao of heaven and earth. This was the advantage of celestial medicines. Around Ling Han, multiple regulations solidified, turning into strange symbols, and forming a nest that sealed Ling Han within its many layers. Very soon, he could no longer be seen, and as time passed, this nest also became solid, turning into a massive egg of light, with light of great Tao rippling around it. 3 days later, multiple fine cracks appeared on the egg of light, and became increasingly closer and closer to each other. They covered the whole egg, and then with a pa, it shattered, and Ling Han was seen standing proudly there. However, his present situation was a little, how should it be described? Not only had all his clothes disappeared, even his hair, eyebrows, and so on had disappeared without a trace, and his whole body was sticky. His clothes and hair had melted when he had been resisting the celestial medicine's swallowing regulations. However, his physique was really too tough, so even the swallowing regulations could do nothing to him. Beneath Celestial King Tier, the regulations outside the 5 elements were all too strong. Ling Han wiped himself carelessly, and the sticky fluid on his body was instantly rinsed off by clean water. He drew out some clothes, which he put on, but his hair and brows were not something that could be regrown in a short while. That was because this was no ordinary injury, but damage caused by regulations. He was confident that he could deliver the 3rd severance now. Chapter 1824, Breaking into the Third Severance. Chapter 1824, Breaking into the Third Severance. Killing Zihei Bingyun had become Ling Han's inner demon and obsession. He exited the Black Tower and released the restrictions on his cultivation level. Instantly, tribulation clouds doled out in the skies. This was a Celestial King tier-level mystery realm, but it was still unable to hide from destiny, which was proof of how high the tier of Heavenly Tao was, as it was superior to even Celestial King tier. Is there any existence that can escape from the Tao of heaven and earth, and not belong to one of the five elements, an existence that is truly noble and able to look down on all else? Ling Han suddenly thought in his heart. Stop this kind of thinking, it is too dangerous. Small Tower suddenly warned. Ling Han only grunted, and did not ask. Heavenly Tao is cruel, and will erase any existence that wishes to escape from its control. Though Heavenly Tao can only take action under certain conditions, and cannot unleash a divine retribution that far exceeds your cultivation level to erase you, it can make you extremely unlucky, and you will never encounter any treasures again in future. Furthermore, you will also repeatedly experience bad luck, Small Tower explained. It calmly said, putting all else aside, it only has to make it so that you will meet a Celestial King, and let this Celestial King know that you possess two source powers. I am sure that the majority of Celestial Kings would make a move on you. Would you be capable of escaping? Ling Han was speechless. He had no fear of heavenly tribulation, as it could not exceed his own cultivation level too far, but if he had been set up to meet a Celestial King at this time, then even the Black Tower could not save him. As the saying went, the will of heaven was mysterious and inexorable. For the present, at least, he was still not qualified to challenge the mysterious Heavenly Tao. He had best just obediently undergo the heavenly tribulation. Fighting with the heavens required him to possess strong abilities. Whatever the case, he would have to be a Celestial King at least, and only then would he be able to sustain the various problems that Heavenly Tao could create for him. Kwong, the heavenly tribulation had formed. Suddenly, a long bolt of lightning struck down, bringing with it the might of regulations, wanting to kill an ant that dared to steal the power of the heaven and earth. Ling Han faced it plainly. After entering into the celestial realm, the heavenly tribulation had actually become considerably gentler towards him. Strictly in terms of power, the heavenly tribulation of Third Severance was definitely innumerable times stronger than the heavenly tribulation of the Genesis tier, but the crux of the matter was that Ling Han's strength was also growing by leaps and bounds. With such a comparison, he was actually having an easier and easier time. That was because in the celestial realm, there was definitely not only one freak like him, so Heavenly Tao did not have to be concerned about him so much. Of course, even king tiers would have to be wary of this kind of heavenly tribulation, but for King among Kings, it was nothing special. In fact, Ling Han even took the initiative to shatter his own body so it could be tempered under the might of the heavenly tribulation. Strike! Ling Han's eyes shone brightly, turning into two divine pillars that shot towards the dome of heaven, as if even the mystery realm could no longer block them. Meanwhile, he used his hand like he would use a saber, and delivered a strike at the skies. Striking the heaven and earth. Wang, this strike clearly had not struck anything, but a loud bang exploded in the heaven and earth, deafening and ear-splitting. This was the sound of great Tao. Suddenly, lightning blazed madly, and the might of the heavenly tribulation soared greatly. This strike of Ling Han was struck at the heaven and earth, causing his connection with the heaven and earth to become even weaker. This naturally had drawn the displeasure of the heaven and earth, and this was just the third severance at that. The fourth severance would definitely incite an even stronger backlash from the heaven and earth. If he could not survive it, that would directly mean his death. Ling Han nodded internally. It was no wonder that there were so few Emperor tiers. Sometimes, even if you had freakish natural talent and met the standards in terms of comprehension ability, would you be able to survive the backlash from the heaven and earth? Each of these 4 strikes was harder to deliver than the last, and the backlash was also stronger with every subsequent strike. The first time, Ling Han could practically ignore it, and he could feel it during the second time, and for this third time, he would have to take it seriously. Then what about the fourth time? Moreover, he was aiming for the fifth severance, so that would be even more frightening. He made his calculations on this basis, and felt that it would be very, very difficult for him to survive the backlash from the heaven and earth after the fifth strike. Even if he cultivated the indestructible heaven's scroll, it would not be of much help to him. Even if he went through rising from the ashes, he would only continue to be insta-killed after his rebirth. Then wouldn't the fifth severance be the strike that killed him? There is always a way out, Small Tower spoke up. In a Celestial King tier sect, the Celestial King would prepare a natural peach seal for those disciples with heaven-defying natural talent. This could shelter them from destiny, and decrease the might of divine retribution by one severance. A thought suddenly flashed through Ling Han's mind. After using the natural peach seal, the fifth severance would actually be crossed like it was only the fourth severance. Then he would have a chance. Furthermore, if he advanced normally, he would probably have one in millions and millions of a chance to succeed, but the Empress was definitely going to fail. Even the supreme divine fetus that had been formed through the 9 deaths heaven art could not possibly match the backlash of the heaven and earth during a fifth severance. Natural peach seal? What is that? Ling Han asked. One of the mother trees of the celestial realm, an existence that is on the same level as the reincarnation tree, Small Tower explained. However, the leaves of the natural peach tree cannot help one to comprehend Tao, and can only help to shelter one from destiny. This was already quite awesome, being capable of deceiving even destiny. Where should I get it from? The Rock Palace should have it. Rock Palace? As Ling Han resisted the heavenly tribulation, his thoughts continued to wander. The reason that he had come to the Fu clan was to find out the whereabouts of the Rock Palace, and now that he had found out that the Rock Palace was in the Western Celestial Realm, and advancing into the fifth severance required the natural peach seal, it looked like he had to head there as soon as possible. When he had advanced into the dividing soul tier, the natural peach seal naturally would have no more significance. All right, I'll head to the Western Celestial Realm after leaving the Mystery Realm, Ling Han shouted, and brandished his fists madly at the heavens. This damn heavenly Tao, why was it torturing him so? Half a day later, no matter how much the heaven and earth wanted to erase Ling Han, it could only withdraw the heavenly tribulation and disperse. Third severance. Ling Han sensed for a while, and a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. At present, he was indescribably strong. At least, when he next encountered Zihei Bingyun, he had the confidence that he would be able to kill her within 1,000 moves. That was because he still had 2 source powers. So what if she was an emperor tier husband? Seeing that the heavenly tribulation had dispersed, the Empress came over elegantly, an expression of pride on her face. She was proud of Ling Han. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Ru was standing some distance away, so shocked that her mouth was gaping. She was aware that Ling Han had only been in the second severance middle stage previously. Though everyone had advanced to the level of peak stage in the Ascending Dragon Palace, the time required to stabilize from the second severance peak stage to the third severance was frighteningly long. She had experienced it before. Even if her sect had still used a rare treasure, which sped up her time by 1,000 times, saving 300,000 years' time for her, she had still used a total of 1 million years' time altogether. They were in the Mystery Realm, so they couldn't use any precious tool to speed up their time, and he had taken just slightly more than half a year's time, which had been mostly spent on digging rocks at that. Even refining a celestial medicine would not have such extreme effects. This guy was really a freak. Freak. Ling Han smiled at the Empress, and said, "Let's go to the mountain cave." He had the mountain treasure in possession, and Zihei Bingyun wouldn't be able to find another mountain treasure in such a short period of time. Then, the most likely thing for her to do would be to lie in ambush in the vicinity of the mountain cave, make a move, and enter before he did when he opened up the mountain cave. If Zihei Bingyun really planned to do this, then that would be where she would die. It was very rare for Ling Han to hate a person so much that he was determined to kill her. However, in Zihei Bingyun's case, if he didn't kill her, his conscience would not be able to rest easy. The 3 of them headed towards the mid-mountain area, and the mountain cave soon appeared. It was very ordinary, and several rocks had sealed the entrance. It was as if just moving them out of the way would grant them entry. They naturally could not be moved at all. Ling Han had made the attempt, but every single rock was heavier than even a star, and was definitely nothing that he could move. He took out the mountain treasure and placed it on a rock like what the dwarfs had said. Then, he only had to wait quietly. Sometimes, it would take half a day, and at others, it would take 3 days, and then the mountain cave would open. You can scram now. Right at this moment, a figure appeared. Luo Changfeng. Chapter 1825, Monarch Tier? Chapter 1825, Monarch Tier? Actually, Luo Changfeng was quite depressed. He had at first thought that he would definitely come first this time round, and the only one that could rival him would be Zihei Bingyun. But when he came out of the Ascending Dragon Palace, he realized that he kept falling behind. Ling Han was the one who had discovered the entrance to this place, and he had brought a huge group of people with him. At first, he thought he would be the first to find the heavenly Dao Jade once they had gone separate ways, but reality had proven that he hadn't even been anywhere close. If it were not for the fact that he had encountered Zihei Bingyun, he still would not know that it was highly possible that the heavenly Dao Jade would be hidden inside this mountain cave, and the way to open it was through the mountain treasure. And now, even in the case of the mountain treasure, Ling Han was still the first to find it. It's fine, Luo Changfeng said to himself. Though he kept falling behind, as long as he could pull off a comeback at the last moments, and take possession of the heavenly Dao Jade, what harm would be done? It was not that he had not been suspicious of the fact that Zihei Bingyun had purposely informed him of such precious intel. Perhaps this was only a lie, but Zihei Bingyun had plucked out a sliver of her memories for his viewing. That was the information that she had obtained after plucking the souls of the tribe of dwarfs. Thus, though Luo Changfeng was still slightly hesitant, he would still enshroud this mountain cave with his divine sense every day. He had not thought that Ling Han had really brought the mountain treasure with him just after a few days. Haha, the heavenly Dao Jade was his now. Facing Ling Han, he naturally was filled with superiority. Previously, Ling Han had obediently let him through, which meant that the latter feared his status as the holy son of a celestial king tier sect. Furthermore, he was an emperor tier-level prodigy. Scram, he demanded arrogantly. Ling Han slanted a sideways glance at him. Did this guy really think that he was all that awesome? He laughed, and said, "Come, demonstrate to me how the action of scramming is done. If you perform well enough, I will reward you." Luo Changfeng was taken aback before coming to realization. Fuck, you actually dare to mock me? You are very outrageously brazen. Luo Changfeng smirked coldly, but did not get angry. It was not worth his while. What kind of esteemed existence was he? If he were to squabble with a nameless character, that would really be attaching too much importance to Ling Han. If he didn't like him, he merely had to erase him directly. Thankfully that guy is not here, or you would have to be cautious about your behind by now. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. The word dog could not be spoken spontaneously. What did that mean? Hiss, it can't be that you are coveting my behind. Pervert. Luo Changfeng's killing intent involuntarily blazed. This guy actually dared have ideas about him. He was really courting death. He humphed, and said, "Since you are so determined to seek your own death, then I'll just." Shio, he had not even finished his words when he saw that Ling Han had already charged over to him. He had shot out a palm strike, which was descending straight down onto his head. Luo Changfeng was furious. Just who do you think you are that you actually dare take the initiative to make a move on me? Die. He extended his index and middle fingers, and waved at Ling Han. An image of a star appeared at the tips of his fingers, exuding an astonishing aura. Pang. The two of them exchanged a blow, and both of them trembled before taking a few steps backwards. They had actually ended up in a tie. Luo Changfeng's whole expression immediately became incredibly colorful. He had indeed witnessed the strength of Ling Han's physique before, but it was only that. In terms of battle prowess, Ling Han was not just a little bit weaker than him, especially when he had now reached the third Severance Peak stage. He was now even more confident that he could suppress everything else. But Ling Han was actually capable of matching him. He could not believe it. What was even more frightening was the fact that the ripple of the other's aura was clearly only in the third Severance early stage. Third Severance early stage, and he was already capable of matching him? It should be known that he was a king among kings. To say nothing of being invincible among his peers, even with the gap of a cultivation level, he was still able to suppress king tiers. Previously, it was always he that would be fighting those in a higher cultivation level than himself, but now the tables were turned, and this was a massive blow to his confidence. On the sidelines, bewitching Maiden Rue had also gone numb with shock. In a battle of equals, it was still Luo Changfeng who was actually at an advantage in cultivation level, but the result of the clash was a tie. Then, if their cultivation level was completely equal, wouldn't it be Ling Han who would be slightly superior? This guy was too freakish. He was actually stronger than even the holy son of a celestial king tier level sec. There was no fear of ignorance, only fear of comparison. Two great emperor tiers were existences that blinded the whole world with their brilliance. Individually, which of them was not incredibly outstanding? But when put together and compared, which was the better would be immediately clear. Monarch tier. Luo Changfeng's voice trembled slightly, but was filled even more with jealousy. King tiers could be invincible among their peers, and king among kings, or emperor tiers, could be invincible even with a gap of a minor level, and as for monarch tier, they would be invincible even with the gap of 2 minor level. In truth, the number of king tiers was very limited. Ordinarily, only 3-star forces could nurture such prodigies. As for a sect, they would only have 4 or 5. At most, it would not exceed 10, and in terms of emperor tier, that could only be found in celestial king tier great forces. Occasionally, this kind of prodigy would appear in 4-star forces, but it was incredibly lucky for even one to appear. But as for monarch tiers, that could only possibly appear in those top-tier celestial king tier forces, such as 9th heaven celestial king tier level. Though there was a celestial king in the ranks of the Thundercloud Palace, this celestial king was only a 2nd heaven celestial king, and was who knew how far away from the 9th heaven. There were 9 heavens in celestial king tier, and every single step forwards was as difficult as ascending the heavens. But now, it was possible that a young monarch tier had appeared in front of him. Just who exactly are you? Luo Changfeng asked darkly. He was an emperor tier, after all, so though he was shocked, he did not panic. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, Ling Han, a mere commoner. There is no need for you to take me to heart. How could he not take it to heart? Luo Changfeng stared coldly at Ling Han. Was there really such a freakish person that could become a monarch tier through his own talent and effort? That was not right. What was a monarch tier? He would have to be a 5th severance, but Ling Han was clearly only in the 3rd severance, and could only be considered an emperor tier. Since there were weaker and stronger king tiers, why wouldn't there be a difference of quality among emperor tiers? Since you are just a commoner, then please die. Luo Changfeng's arms shook. Ka. Golden light suddenly rose up from his arms, which turned into multiple symbols that stuck tightly onto his arms, forming a pair of arm guards. He was just standing there proudly, but his whole figure was exuding a domineering aura that overwhelmed all else. Zihei Bingyun had the supreme regulations bestowed by a celestial king, and what he had was this pair of arm guards. This was something that the celestial king of Thundercloud Palace had used before, and a sliver of his aura was left in them. Though it was just a sliver, it was enough to sweep aside all opposition in the severing mundane tier. Anything that involved a celestial king was always that awesome. Luo Changfeng crooked his finger, his disdain seeping into his actions and words. Aren't you a commoner? Then I'll just treat you like a commoner. Ling Han chuckled derisively, and merely looked at Luo Changfeng's arm guards. This thing could be further refined by the divine demon sword, which was great. In front of a celestial king, every other existence is an ant. Luo Changfeng said in an overbearing tone. So noisy, take a punch from me. Ling Han charged out, 2 source powers entwined around his fists. This was enough to allow him to resist the aura of a celestial king. You overestimate yourself. Luo Changfeng smirked coldly, and also shot out both fists. One after another, the symbols on the arm guards lit up. The power of Great Tao was boundless, and that was an aura that could suppress the severing mundane tier. Ling Han was the type to become stronger with a strong foe. His 2 source powers were limited by his own cultivation level, and he could not express their full might, but when they encountered the challenge from the aura of a celestial king, their might naturally increased. Peng! The two of them exchanged a blow again. Their figures slid back respectively, and it ended in a tie once again. Chapter 1826 Emperor Tears Join Forces. Chapter 1826 Emperor Tears Join Forces. This time, Luo Changfeng's expression really changed drastically. In fact, even his skull was starting to go numb. He had already used the Celestial King Tier technique, yet was still incapable of suppressing Ling Han. Gasp! It was either that this brat was the descendant of a celestial king, or that he had obtained a supreme opportunity, and that was the only way he could match the Celestial King Tier technique. His eyes immediately lit up. If it was the latter possibility, and he obtained it, then perhaps he would have a chance of becoming a celestial king himself. Just how many holy sons and holy daughters had come out of the Thundercloud Palace? Many, very many. As generations passed, after their old holy sons and holy daughters advanced to the ascending origin tier, they would no longer hold the position of a holy son or holy daughter. Instead, they would become elders, but throughout this epoch, no second celestial king emerged from the Thundercloud Palace. Why? Celestial King Tier was too hard to break through to. Even a Celestial King Tier force would have extremely great difficulty to produce a true heir. However, Celestial Kings were the true immortals. They could even shatter the immortals' tribulation easily, and there was no fear that the entire force would suddenly crumble when the Celestial King died one day. Luo Changfeng was confident that he could reach the ascending origin tier. As for becoming a Celestial King, that was practically impossible for him. Thus, he needed the heavenly Tao Jade to deliver the fifth severance. If he succeeded in achieving the fifth severance, then becoming a Celestial King was a sure bet. Furthermore, he would definitely not be limited to just the first heaven. However, aside from the heavenly Tao Jade, there were other treasures that could help one to advance to the Celestial King Tier in this world, such as the source powers of the heaven and earth. He examined Ling Han's hands closely, and his heart skipped a beat. He asked, "You have obtained the source power of heaven and earth?" Ling Han was slightly surprised. The other party was actually capable of recognizing the Nine Heavens Flame and Xianyan Source Water. Seeing Ling Han's expression, Luo Changfeng instantly confirmed his guess internally. He had guessed correctly, and when Ling Han saw the dawning realization in his expression, he understood that the other had actually just been throwing out random guesses. However, he did not hide it. He opened up his right palm. Boom, a flame sword, and it was formed completely from symbols of great Tao. This is the Nine Heavens Flame. Then, he stretched out his left hand, and similarly opened his palm. This time, though, a cold air rose. This is the Xianyan Source Water. Fuck. Luo Changfeng had practically never uttered any swear words in this lifetime, yet now he had a strong urge to curse. Source powers of heaven and earth, just what kind of rare and precious existence were they? Even the majority of celestial kings could not possibly possess them, yet a mere third severance cultivator had actually possessed these two source powers of heaven and earth. What justice was there left in this world? A smile slowly appeared on Luo Changfeng's lips. Then, he laughed loudly. Ling Han, you are really my lucky star. Ling Han also smiled, and said, "Are you about to say that I have come from so far away just to deliver two source powers of heaven and earth to you? How could that not be the case?" Luo Changfeng asked arrogantly. By now, he was sure that Ling Han was definitely not the descendant of a celestial king tier force. Otherwise, what celestial king would let their disciple possess two source powers of heaven and earth? Since that was the case, on what basis could Ling Han match a celestial king tier technique? Did he think that just because he had two source powers of heaven and earth, he could do whatever he liked without any scruples? Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Your thoughts are too fantastical." "Oh, then what if you add me into the equation?" Zihei Bingyun's voice rang out. Her figure appeared elegantly, her right hand holding a sword that was as bright as autumn waters. Luo Changfeng frowned slightly, but subsequently relaxed. By now, he had guessed that Zihei Bingyun had told him about the mountain treasure because she was in fact targeting Ling Han. The reason was that she could make use of him to deal with Ling Han. But to be honest, though his words might seem very confident, he was similarly filled with wariness towards Ling Han. If he joined forces with Zihei Bingyun, that would be combining two Celestial King tier techniques, and that would definitely mean their victory was guaranteed. Ling Han's eyes passed over her, and his killing intent immediately blazed as he glared at Zihei Bingyun. "I want the 9 heavens flame," Luo Changfeng said. "Fine." Zihei Bingyun nodded, and the two of them had instantly reached an agreement. One wanted the 9 heavens flame, while the other wanted the Shenyan source water. Both of them knew that it was impossible for them to take sole possession of two source powers of heaven and earth with the other here, so they could only share the spoils. However, even a single source power of heaven and earth was already incredibly awesome. Even the majority of celestial kings could only feel envy. Obtaining a source power of heaven and earth meant they would definitely become a celestial king otherwise. That would definitely mean death. Ling Han smirked coldly. "2 corpses, and you are still daydreaming. Die." Luo Changfeng and Zihei Bingyun both launched an offensive against Ling Han at the same time. One charged from the right side, while the other took the left side. Though they had never worked together before, as emperors, they could understand what the other wanted with a single look, and their cooperation was flawless. Ling Han would have to face 2 great emperors at the same time. The empress did not move. Though she was an emperor, there was still a gap of a minor level, so she would not be of much help to Ling Han. She might as well just obediently watch from the sidelines to avoid causing trouble for Ling Han. Meanwhile, bewitching maiden Ru was restless. She could somehow match a 3rd Severance Peak stage emperor, but both Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng had Celestial King tier techniques. Against this kind of secret technique, she could only feel helpless resentment. Thus, seeing that the Empress did not move, she also sat and watched from the sidelines. Ling Han was fighting the descendants of 2 great Celestial King tier forces, but he was not the slightest bit afraid. The 9 heavens flame and Shenyan source water were both entwined around his fists, and as he rained down a barrage of punches, he was not being reasonable at all. He was just using this kind of method to crush his opponents. Who let this be his source powers, so there was no need for him to fear using them too much. But Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng could not do the same. One had the Celestial King tier regulations, while the other wore a precious armor. Both would come to a time when they were completely used up, so which of them dared take him on forcefully? In a clash between strong enemies, it would be the braver one that would win. Ling Han showed his full domineering demeanor, and Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng could only dodge his blows. They wanted to wait until Ling Han was exhausted, and then turn around to deliver a counterattack to kill the latter. But how could such plans possibly succeed? "We can't go on like this," Zihei Bingyun communicated to Luo Changfeng through divine sense. Luo Changfeng understood it completely. At this moment, he did not dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest, yet coveted the 9 heavens flame and Shenyan source water even more. A Celestial King tier technique might be strong, but that, after all, was not a power that belonged to him personally. There would ultimately come a time when it would be used up. However, if he could obtain and refine a source power of heaven and earth, then that would be a completely different story. This person in front of him was clear proof. With 2 great source powers of heaven and earth, not only was he capable of matching a Celestial King tier technique, he could be extravagant with his use of them because there was no need for him to worry that he would use them up, and there was no need to worry that he would be powerless later on. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he said, "This is the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm." Zihei Bingyun was also a smart person, and immediately realized. As long as one has lost the Blood Dragon armor, then the fire element of heaven and earth is capable of eliminating even an immortal palace tier. For example, even though they had Celestial King tier techniques, they still had to wear the Blood Dragon armor before they dared to enter into this place. A Celestial King tier technique was supposed to be used on the Heavenly Dao Jade, and not the fire element in this place. Of course, it was not that Celestial Kings did not have a technique that could help them be immune to the fire element of heaven and earth, but if it was something that could be resolved with a Blood Dragon armor, what was the point of going the extra mile? The 2 Emperor tiers immediately found a strategy, and when they once again launched their attacks at Ling Han, they were aiming fatal strikes madly at the clothes he was wearing. Ling Han's expression involuntarily became strange. Those two should know that he was not wearing the blood dragon armor. If he said it out, he was really afraid that the two of them couldn't accept the fact. Peng. 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 But Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng did not take other things into consideration at all. They both thought that they had found the perfect method to deal with Ling Han, and inflicted damage at all costs, determined to make Ling Han naked. Chapter 1827, A Different Kind of Great Battle. Chapter 1827, A Different Kind of Great Battle. Ling Han was very speechless. The two great elites seemed utterly determined to tear his clothes apart so that he would be naked. Most importantly, this did not have the slightest significance, yet Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng still looked like they would win as long as they had torn his clothes off him, which Ling Han did not know whether to laugh or cry at. And the problem was Ling Han did not have the slightest desire to be bare and naked, to say nothing of the fact that his wife and bewitching maiden Ru were still here. Even if they weren't here, he had no interest to expose himself completely to the two of them. If they were so intent on tearing clothes, they should just tear off their own. Ling Han was furious. Come on then, wasn't it just tearing off clothes? Did they think he didn't know how to go about doing it? He also used his techniques, and made a move on Zihei Bingyun's and Luo Changfeng's clothes. He would really like to see who would be bared first. The three king among kings fought fiercely. This scene was naturally incredibly grand, yet bewitching maiden Ru was watching in shock, wearing a very strange expression on her face. You guys, are you really Emperor Tears? There is no other Emperor Tear like you people. Making a move on each other's clothes, they were just like old housewives or hoodlums on the streets, tearing and pulling at each other. There was really no taste to it. Is it really all right for you to act like that? Now that the great battle to tear off clothes had been launched, even Ling Han was unable to escape. His physique was indeed very strong, and he was unafraid of the attacks from two great kings among kings, but his clothes weren't. In the face of having two great Emperor Tears so determined to attack, even if it meant that they would be injured, how could they not be damaged quickly? Even if the clothes that he was wearing were woven using top-grade saintly material, which had also been fused with the celestial wings of certain immortal beasts, how could they manage to hold up to the desperate attacks of Celestial King tier techniques of two-thirds Severance Emperor Tears? However, though the clothes on Ling Han had turned into pieces, Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were not all that much better off, either. The clothes they were wearing were also ripped. They practically looked like beggars. This caused Zihei Bingyun and Luo Changfeng to feel fear. That was because they knew that they were not able to resist the fire element of heaven and earth here, and once the blood dragon armor had been torn open, they would definitely be dead. But this also firmed their resolve. That was because since Ling Han had counterattacked so fiercely, it had to mean that he had been scared. Then let's just see who will be the first to fall. I'll rip. The two great Emperor Tears gritted their teeth, and continued to rip like mad. You rip. Don't I know how to rip as well? Ling Han was enraged. He had no intention of exposing his behind in public. Boom, the nine heavens flame turned into swords under the flame control technique, and slashed madly at the two great Emperor Tears. Even if Zihei Bingyun's and Luo Changfeng's strength was extremely powerful, they would not be able to protect themselves entirely. This was a true Celestial King technique, and added with it being a source power of heaven and earth, it was exceedingly powerful. Use your ultimate technique. Zihei Bingyun forced out through gritted teeth. If this continued, it was possible that they would be bared first instead of Ling Han. This naturally could not be allowed. Luo Changfeng gritted his teeth, and then suddenly delivered a palm strike onto his chest. Suddenly, blood spurted from his mouth. However, he stretched out a finger and drew a circle, and the blood floated as if it had turned into swimming fish. This blood flickered with light, then rapidly evaporated, and was absorbed by the arm guards. Then, the originally golden arm guards became even brighter. Multiple flashes of light spread out, turning into an incredibly complex symbol. Luo Changfeng's whole person had become considerably weaker. Limited by his cultivation level, These arm guards could release severing mundane tier-level battle prowess at most, but now he had sacrificed a mouthful of blood essence, yet had increased the might of the arm guards further to a new level. On the other side, Zihe Bingyun's expression was also grim. Multiple symbols lit up on her body, and a half-transparent precious sword emerged from her chest. This was the might of her ethereal divine fetus. Under her stimulation, in which she spared no expense, a great amount of grey hair appeared at her hairline. Her life force had been greatly expended, but she had ultimately summoned the ethereal divine sword. What was a divine fetus? That was one that possessed some celestial king-tier technique, but because their cultivation level was not there yet, they would have to pay an extremely high price if they wanted to use this technique. But now, it was either you that would become naked or me, and the two great emperor tiers naturally would not have the slightest bit of hesitation left. You had best be the one to become naked. Go. Zihe Bingyun and Luo Changfeng simultaneously released their strongest attack, which blasted towards Ling Han. Peng. As the attacks surged past, the brilliant light instantly concealed Ling Han completely. After flashing blindingly for at least a breath's time, it finally dimmed. This could possibly be the most unusual battle in history. Three great emperor tiers were giving their all just to make their opponent naked. If this was made public, it was possible that no one would believe it. The greater possibility would that everyone would be laughing their heads off. Ling Han appeared, exposing his fair, naked body, as well as bloodstains. Thankfully, because of these bloodstains, Ling Han managed to save his modesty. After all, that was the might released from a celestial king-tier tool and a divine fetus, and even one with Ling Han's physique had still been wounded. Both Zihe Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were dumbfounded. Of course, they were not stunned by the majestic size of a certain part of Ling Han's body, but rather that this guy had just suffered a slight injury, and then that was that. This was a fatal area. Where did you wear your blood dragon armor? The two of them searched earnestly, but they could not find the presence of the blood dragon armor at all. It could be worn inside one's clothes, but it was impossible that it was still invisible when one was completely bare. You are definitely not human. Meanwhile, bewitching maiden Ru wanted very much to cover her face. Though it was Ling Han's behind that was turned towards her, for elites like them, their divine sense could completely be used like eyes. Wherever their divine sense had swept, they naturally would be able to see very clearly. Though she was the holy daughter of the purity sect, and her strength was in charm techniques, she had never had any intimate contact with any man before, what more seeing a man completely bare and naked as the day he was born. Ling Han took out some clothes, but did not have the time to put them on. He directly tied them at his waist. It was enough for them to temporarily conceal him. He glared at Zihe Bingyun and Luo Changfeng, enraged to the extreme. They actually dared to force him to run naked. Die. Ling Han pounced out, and launched an offensive against Zihe Bingyun and Luo Changfeng. This time, Zihe Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were really incapable of holding up to it. They had already used a powerful move, and now was precisely their weakest time. How could they hold up to this furious counterattack from Ling Han? Furthermore, Ling Han was similarly just targeting their clothes, and that was definitely even harder to defend than their bodies. Pieces of fabric flew everywhere, and Zihe Bingyun and Luo Changfeng very soon followed in Ling Han's footsteps, becoming completely bare and naked. Luo Changfeng was still better off. After all, he was a man, yet Zihe Bingyun felt like she was about to die of shame. Right in front of 4 people, and 2 of them were men at that. Multiple holes were torn in her clothes, and her body was completely exposed to the extreme. However, this was far from the only thing she had to worry about. She had worn the blood dragon armor inside her clothes. That was because she wanted to look beautiful, and wearing the blood dragon armor outside her clothes would affect aesthetic senses, but whether it was used as outer armor or inner armor, this armor was now covered with holes, and its protective effects had already vanished. She could clearly feel a murderous aura hovering around her, restless around where the holes were, but because the blood dragon armor still had some effect, she was able to withstand it for the moment, yet her time was definitely limited. Retreat. Without the slightest hesitation, Zihe Bingyun immediately turned around to flee. If she had lost even her life, then what was the point of the heavenly Dao Jade? Even if she wanted revenge, she would still have to be alive to do that. She was very self-centered, completely unconcerned with Luo Changfeng's survival. She was very decisive and determined when she turned to flee, as if it had not been the two of them who had just fought together on the same side. Humph! How could Ling Han possibly allow her to do as she pleased? Even if he didn't kill Luo Changfeng this time round, he was determined to kill Zihei Bingyun. Without ridding the world of this cruel and vicious demoness, his heart would never be at peace again. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,